Welcome, everyone, to the 2024 Kim Wall Memorial Fund celebration. As you know, the fund was created in honor of Kim, and through the fund, in partnership with Kim's family, the IWMF distributes grants to women journalists pursuing underrepresented stories that take a closer look at often offbeat stories that are neglected and that share societal truths. I'm Elisa Liz Munoz, the Executive Director of the International Women's Media Foundation, and it is truly an honor for the IWMF each year to host this event with Kim's family and friends. Today, we mark what would have been Kim's 37th birthday. Apologies, tomorrow we will mark Kim's birthday. Like you, we feel the loss of Kim, and this year in particular, we also are missing Kim's beloved father, Zhaoyin. We know that they are both looking down and smiling on us today. During today's program, we'll reflect on Kim's legacy and the impact of the Memorial Fund, which is now in its 7th year. We'll be speaking to 2022 grantee Ye Charlotte Ming and our just announced 2024 grantees Audrey Gray, Zhaoyin Feng, and Isobel Thompson. But first, let's take a few minutes to look at Kim's life through a video created by her loved ones.
Hi, my name is Kim Wall. I'm currently in the middle of the Pacific on the Lady E, a Marshallese government supply ship, on my way back from Anueta Castle, where I've been reporting on the nuclear waste sites threatened by climate change. This is exactly the kind of stories I like to do, where I can combine on the ground, shoot letter reporting with the foreign policy lens. Hopefully carve out a space for myself in the male-dominated world that is foreign policy. Thank you.
Kim was an artist and a storyteller in every sense.
She seemed to be utterly and uniquely unafraid of going into uncharted territories.
She had wanderlust in droves, and it hung off her every word.
Kim had an infectious curiosity that was almost childlike in nature, full of innocence and goodwill.
She grabbed every opportunity she could. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Along the way, her life became an adventure.
The world through Kim's eyes was a rare and special perspective. She didn't shy away from tough questions.
My friend Kim wrote stories that transformed cultural anthropology into popular narratives.
She made going from continent to continent look like it was no big deal.
We complain often that journalism lacks creativity and depth, but Kim had so much of both.
She told human stories. In the same way she lived her life, she told them with grace, dignity, and joyous care for our shared experiences.
I remember when she told me about her upbringing. Both of her parents were journalists, and she had often accompanied them on small reporting trips. That's why she's so good, I thought.
Kim would have wanted more women out in the world, brushing up against life.
She gave voice to the weak, the vulnerable and marginalized people. That voice has been needed for a long time. Now it will not be.
And now we'll hear from Kim's mother, Ingrid.
March 23 is a very special day in the calendar in our family. It's the day Kim came into this world 37 years ago. But it's also the day my youngest granddaughter, Elle, turns 1.5, a day worth celebrating. Elle and Kim will never meet in real life, but Elle and her brother Lee always have Aunt Kim around. We talk about and also to Kim every day. It's our way of keeping Kim's memory alive. How could I not wish to hear her views on the state of the world right now? She, with all her knowledge and wisdom, would have a lot to give us who don't understand why things look the way they do right now. Since the very first terrible days when Kim disappeared, the work with the fund has become very important to us. Through it, we can ensure that Kim's voice lives on in different forms on different continents. It gives meaning and comfort. This year, we have the pleasure of being able to expand our group with additional young, talented journalists. Thanks to generous people, KWMF is able to award no less than 3 scholarships to women who want to follow in Kim's footsteps. We see every year how the group grows, and it really makes a difference. We have created opportunities to let important stories be told. We will continue to do so for a long, long time. Elle and Lee will one day carry on Aunt Kim's legacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. We're so honored to be here today to recognize our 2022 Kim Wall Memorial Fund grantee, Ye Charlotte Ming. We like to look back and speak to past winners to find out how the grant has impacted their life and their reporting. And we're very excited to hear from you, Charlotte. Before we dive into your incredible story, I'd really just love to hear a little bit about what drives you as a journalist. What led you on this path?
I think I went to journalism school and I always studied communication and journalism, and I had an interest in sort of telling underreported stories, and now I have sort of moved into longer forms and kind of focusing on one topic, which is the history of German colonialism in China and the story of museum decolonization in Europe as well. And pretty much, I think a lot of the things that I'm interested in now is sort of coming from also a personal experience of being an immigrant living in Europe, in Berlin at the moment. And yeah, I think my why I love journalism is really about having that opportunity to, you know, connect with people, to talk with sources, and also really have the space to dive into something previously really unknown.
Thank you. We know that the journalism industry is in sharp decline and that it's harder and harder for young journalists to tell their stories that we think are so important. Can you share how receiving the Kim Wall grant allowed you to tell your story and what it means for you in the long term and how you see your career prospects moving forward?
Definitely. Yeah, so this grant was really, really important for me because I had started working on this topic of German colonial history in China out of my own interest, but also in the beginning I was supported by another research grant that helped me kind of establish a bigger picture of this history. And I was looking into different aspects of like street names with colonial past and in colonial heritage in China, in my hometown. And through that process, I discovered the story about colonial loot in German museums. And I had ran out of money to delve into that. But this was just the beginning of this research project going on in Germany, as well as museums just began to look into this to their collections for potential loot items from China. Yeah, so this was really great for me because it really gave me a really long period of time to be able to follow the research team that I profiled along, to talk to different experts in China and in Germany, as well as really having the space to dive into the history without worrying too much about the financial aspect of journalism, and it really gave me a lot of time to, you know, read a lot of academic studies, to to really make the story sort of come alive in my own words rather than having that come through interviews.
I thought your reporting was so fantastic. It was really such a page turner. And I think that some of that was your focus on the one researcher who was so doggedly looking into all of these incredible items that she was finding in museum basements. I'm just curious, when most of the world was focusing on a different kind of looted art in Germany, how did you decide that you wanted this story to be told as well?
I think so. In Germany, I have seen a lot of research projects and a lot of conversations in museums and in the public debates going on about African colonial loot in German museums. And I think I got a lot of inspiration about how that's being talked about because it's strangely, you know, China has a lot of things that were looted and that are in world museums, but somehow previously, as someone coming from China as a journalist, I wasn't particularly interested in it because there is always an aspect of, you know, nationalism. Is this a big story? And the story is always about, you know, rich Chinese people now buying their stuff back without looking at the sort of the challenges of that countries face historically in getting their looted treasures back. So, and it just so happens that now in Germany, with this whole debate about confronting the German colonial past, and they had a really short few decades of that compared to other European colonial powers, but they sort of they are approaching it with a kind of vigorous that's very, very interesting. So I was really lucky to meet these researchers who are really, really supportive of my reporting as well, because they want to show their work, they want to show this process and show this history to the German and international audiences. Yeah, so I got really lucky to have the chance to connect with them.
One part of your story that, well, a lot of the parts surprised me, but one particular part of your story that I found intriguing was that you mentioned that the Chinese government isn't that involved in really pushing for the return of the artifacts. And I was curious to hear your thoughts about why that might be.
I think I came into the story with this big question as well, because I reported on the German side. I saw that they hosted conference here without, you know, really the Chinese side participating. So everybody is wondering here, you know, what does China want in this? Because they are known for, you know, protesting, you know, the British Museum and, you know, rich art collectors getting things back and the bronzy heads and so on. And then going to China and actually talking to people about this, I realized, okay, it's much more complex than what we know of. Actually, one researcher, one expert, a law expert told me that because of the lack of international frameworks, international laws on this issue, especially for colonial era loot, China has not had much success. So what they're focusing is really recently lost stuff, like stuff that were maybe trafficked out of China in the 90s and later. So this is very different from what media typically covers. Yeah, so, and I also find that it's interesting that usually when we look at China, we think about China as one entity. And when you actually talk to people, talk to different people in different positions, they all have their own position and their own interests, and the you know, different level of government, different level of institutions have their own interests. So they are not always working together, and they all have, you know, the relationships they care about and so on. So it's very interesting to find out that.
And similarly, I'm curious to hear if you were able to speak to, people who were outside of the government, maybe people in the art world, or even everyday citizens, if they had opinions about wanting to get their heritage back in the country.
Yeah, I think there are definitely, I think I see two opinions. And one is there are people who are very invested in this. So this topic of colonial loot often gets very trendy on Chinese internet. Often, sometimes attached with a more patriotic, or you can say nationalistic sentiment to that. But then there are also other people who say, okay, yeah, it's something, it's there, but we also lost a lot of our cultural heritage during the Cultural Revolution as well. So a lot of people are really, really are much more reflective about that and about our own history as well. So I find that really interesting.
That is really interesting. What's the follow-up to this story?
Yeah, so I was just at their conference of this research team, and right before the story was published. And basically, I think they still have a few months left of their projects. And so basically, this research project is not, I think what they want to achieve is to have guidelines and kind of research methods so that other museums in Germany, in German-speaking world, and in other countries can sort of look into their own collections for traces of Boxer rebellion era loot from China. So that's one aspect, but they did find, I think the research focused on to 100 objects, and there have been some that they are able to establish the origin and the kind of the storyline. And I think the focus now is to continue to research that. And I am not sure if they will talk restitution, because the two sides want to make very clear to me this research project is not about restitution, and they come from from researchers' perspective. But I would like to see sort of this, interact more with the public and see what the public is able to push this conversation forward. So they will finish their research officially in June this year, and I'm hoping that there will be more different projects looking into different museums from now on.
And do you plan to go to other countries to explore this further?
I would really love to. I mean, there were so many countries involved in the Boxer, in suppressing the Boxer rebellion in China in the 1900s. That was the back of this loot, where Beijing was plundered following this war, and basically the imperial palaces and everything were basically up for grabs, and that went to museums around the world, in the US, in the UK, in France, in the Netherlands, in Italy, and in Japan. So I think it would depend on whether the countries are willing to open up research, if they're willing to look into their collections.
Yeah, and from Germany, have items been returned?
There have been items returned to former African colonies, to Namibia, and also there have been a big amount of Beni bronzes being returned to Nigeria. But China is really, really early on in the conversation. So I think it's interesting that I think they have started to, I think that they took the first step with the Beni bronzes, which the country was not a German colony. And they took a lot of steps also with Native American items as well as Maui human remains. But I think actually dealing with the German colonial history is a bit more sensitive in this country as well.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I just want to wrap up quickly, but I want to ask you one more important question, and that is, what would you tell young women journalists right now? What could they learn from Kim's legacy and from your own experience as well?
That's a big question. I think I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I knew Kim and how she influenced me, and maybe that could be something for young journalists today as well, because I worked with her on a story in 2016 and 2017. It was also a longer term story, which unfortunately couldn't be published in the end, but it was so insightful and great to work with her, because I was, more like a desk journalist at that time. I was a photo editor and I was sitting in the office all the time. It was just really great to go out with her, to sort of see that energy she has, to see that curiosity she had in everything and in the people she met, and really just be open and trust people that they have something to share and do not be afraid to ask questions, big and small. And yeah, and even a lot of I think practical things around freelancing I learned from her, just peeking into the process of how she worked. So yeah, I guess like be ambitious, be practical as well, be smart with your finances and with choosing your subject, but most of all, be open to the world and to discovering them.
Oh, thank you, Charlotte. What a beautiful way to end this conversation. I wish we could talk to you longer. And I'm happy to pass it on to Ingrid and Tom to interview this year's winners. Thank you so much, Charlotte.
Thank you so much.
Ingrid, Tom, do you want to take it from here?
Yes. So first, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. First of all, congratulations for being the grantees of Kim. Very shortly, can you tell us a little bit about your story? I think, shall we start with Audrey? What is the story you will do?
Oh, I'd love to. And I just wanted to say thank you, Ingrid and Tom. It's such an honor to be here with you. This is not like any other grant. And it's very moving to celebrate this incredible journalist. I was a few years behind her at her same J school. And we had this sense early on of like, how is she so good already? She's in her 20s and she's doing these pieces with ideas and policy considerations, characters and details from the gods. And I just admired her so much. I even admired the top knot. I thought that half top knot was like the perfect solution for reporting in the field. So miss her example. And I'm glad to talk about her. The project I'm working on this year, and so grateful for your support on it, is a confluence of two stories that Kim reported really well. One was the impacts of climate change already. She was seeing them and finding them in the places where people were in danger already because of fires and floods and storms and extreme heat. she had a way of working them into almost every story she did because they were all happening and she knew it. And she was also reporting on the human rights of queer and trans communities around the world. She had an incredible knack of finding the most interesting people and bringing us along. So this project is a story about a kind of new but fast-growing movement to create emergency shelters that are open and safe for queer and trans people around the world. And I'm going to place myself in actually a US state, a very red state, a state that this year alone, and it's only March, has already seen 54 pieces of anti-trans and queer legislation. And not all of these laws are passing, but they're on the books and they're changing the climate of life there. And these are laws, like one of them is called the Patriotism Not Pride Bill. Another law that's proposed says there will be no representations of rainbows anywhere on state property. And that's changed the climate of this town where I'll be. And I don't want to say where it is yet. We'll wait for this story to come out. But it's a place where trans kids have died even this year. So matters. Kim knew that too. And in the midst of all of these storms, also, this is a place where storms tear through already, and they're amplified, they're stronger and more frequent because of the energy in a warmer world. So a group of people in this town are creating, they're reworking actually an old factory and making it into a climate shelter that will be open for anyone in that neighborhood, especially anyone who's marginalized or othered. And that might be the elderly in the neighborhood or the unhoused, but specifically for their own community. And one of my sources there said last week, you know, we have to make something, we have to have something to celebrate. We can't be grieving all the time. So I will be with them this year as this unfolds. And see how it goes. And it is something that is happening not just in this place where I'll be, but also around the world. And there is new data to show that when you are queer or trans, you're 2 to 4 times more likely to be displaced after some kind of disaster event, and even to displaced 30 days later because you're pushed out from networks of care that usually kick in. And so this is I think a really prescient movement. They're aware that this is going to be more and more necessary. And so I'm really looking forward to digging in with them.
Thank you. Isobel, will you take over and tell about your story?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. And first, I just wanted also to express my profound thank you. This is such an honor to be here and to talk to you guys about my story. And so I'm looking at some of the women who are resisting paramilitary violence in Northern Ireland. The Troubles obviously ended many years ago in Northern Ireland, but in some communities, in various forms, paramilitary groups still control those communities. They're usually deprived communities, both sides of the religious divide. And one of the ways that they kind of maintain control is through this system of so-called punishments. So for people that step out of line. So that could be, you know, a system of intimidation, of exiles, and also, I believe, very shockingly, a system of so-called punishment shootings or beatings, which are often by appointment. And there's been kind of some coverage of but scant coverage of the fact that this is still going on in the UK, on UK soil. But primarily the issue, when it is looked at through the male gaze. You know, victims and perpetrators are primarily male. And so I'm interested in looking at the effect that this violence has on women in the communities. Often it's mothers who sometimes have to be the ones to organize their own sons' shootings by appointment, because if they don't do that, the alternative could be so much worse. So I want to look at the effect that the violence has on them, but also, and I think this is hopefully the kind of core of what I want to focus on. I want to look at how women are coming together to promote kind of a form of resistance against this armed patriarchy. I want to look at how they're helping to, contribute to a sense of healing, a sense of moving away from this. And yeah, so in a nutshell, I want to look at the effect of violence, but also focus on healing, resilience, and hope through the lens of women in these communities.
Thank you. And Zhaoyin?
Thank you, Ingrid. Before I introduce my project, I'd like to say I feel very honored to be with you all today to celebrate Kim's life and to say a heartfelt thank you to Ingrid, Tom, IWMF, and everyone who makes the Kim War Memorial Fund possible. I actually have only recently become a freelance journalist. While I navigate this new chapter of my career, I get to experience firsthand that it's not easy to be a freelance journalist, particularly for women. Women freelance journalists deserve better support. And I'm immensely grateful for the Kim War Memorial Fund and IWMF for providing such generous and strong support for our community. I also came to understand and appreciate more about Kim and how tenacious, passionate, and hardworking she was as a journalist. She always stood on the front line of her profession. Just like we just heard her saying in the video, she was doing on-the-ground shoe letter reporting. And thanks to this grant, I will be able to go to the scene of my story to do that old-fashioned shoe letter reporting as well, to pursue the journalism that Kim truly believed in. I'm really grateful for that. And just like Kim, I feel passionate about finding quirky, underreported, and oftentimes cross-cultural stories around the world. And for this grant, my project would focus on the rapid increase of Chinese immigrants-owned cafes in Italy, and to try to answer the questions of why and how a cup of espresso, which many people consider as quintessentially Italian, come to be served increasingly by Chinese baristas in Italy. And if you have been to Italy, you might have noticed that cafes are everywhere in this country, and they're more than a place for a cup of drinks. Cafes in Italy act as community centers, and locals go to the cafe to socialize with each other over a cup of espresso or cappuccino, and they are certainly a crucial part of the Italian culture. But this new trend of Chinese immigrants-owned cafe in Italy has also prompted some anxiety among Italians of losing an important piece of their culture to the Chinese, who looked, of course, visually different from the ethnic Italians. And there is an underlying question: can a person of Chinese descent who is seen to be from an alien culture possibly make an authentic espresso or cappuccino? For me, the story is also quite urgent because the wave of the anti-Asian racism during the pandemic, as well as the anti-immigrant policy or sentiment across Europe, have added to the dynamics behind this phenomenon. For me, it's a story beyond just espresso or cup of coffee, but it's about the intersection of food, identity, and race. And I'm really looking forward to dive into it.
Thank you. Tom?
Well, I would just like to know what you all think makes a story good.
I can start if that's helpful. And I think for me, my answers is quite simple. With long form journalism, I think what makes a story good and compelling is for it to be character driven. I think that, you can focus on investigating and policy and statistics as much as you want, but unless you have a compelling character, and often a complex character who doesn't necessarily fit into categorization, or you can't force them into your idea of this person's good or this person's bad. A bit of complexity is good. But I think, yeah, having a flawed but relatable human at the heart of your story is something that makes it work and makes people remember, and hopefully has an impact as well.
You know, one of the things I'm still learning from Kim's pieces, which are evergreen, I mean, I really think they should be taught, a number of them. She had, as a reporter, you're always trying to very judiciously use first person, if you use it at all. Sometimes it's more honest to say, I was there, it's not some voice of God telling you the story, this is how it was, but saying, I am a person with a perspective and this is what hit me. And she did that some, but she did something which I find really interesting. And she did it with Grace, which was she used first person plural. So she wasn't saying, oh, the source told me, or I went to boom. She was saying we and us. And it's one of the reasons why when you read a Kim story, I think you feel like you're along with her and really experiencing a place and the people in a room even, because she'll say, like in her Harper's story, when she's in Havana and she's in an apartment, and she said, a grandmother came out and served us homemade caramel pudding. And it's not about her, but she's there, and because it's us, we are also there. I love that. Is hard to do well. And she really, she used first person and sometimes third person. She was exploring with it all, depending on the situation. And I think often your form, the actual, what you got to work with sort of leads to what choice you're going to make. But I really liked her first person plural choice. And I want to use it. It's actually pretty rare that it's done well. It's one of the things I think makes a great story. The other thing is just these micro details, the universal specific. I was taught, it's this idea of like a small thing that says everything. So Kim would say, dust was swirling around this tour guide's ballet flats. And you can just kind of see the whole thing, and it's the small details. She was great at these. So I really, when I'm in the field, I've learned to just observe and observe and observe and get all the little things down, the colors, the flavors, the feeling of the weather that day. I'm always like, just, the goal is to become 5 or 6 senses all working, and your instinct being the 6th, and just keep getting it all down and sprinkle it in, because when you have all of those details, it communicates a feeling. And, we feel that when we read Kim's pieces, or any good piece of, long form, really the details are what make you feel it. So those are my thoughts.
These are all very good points. I think for me, I'm the most interested in stories that have good characters and also can reflect on the big picture of what have prompted them to make certain decisions in their life. And it's similar to what Kim described of her own stories, the on-the-ground stories with a foreign policy angle. But her pieces are oftentimes very empathetic and compassionate as well. She had a great gift of connecting with people, no matter which country they're from or which walks they're in. And I really appreciate her stories of depicting people who want to shake up the status quo. Just like her story about the Kampala Chinatown and the colorful details she described and the very powerful characters she found in that piece, both incredible. And I hope my story can carry on her legacy in connecting with all these wonderful people. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, so writing well is one thing, but finding something to write about can be, in my experience, even harder. So tell us, how do you find your stories, and how did you find the stories you are about to report on?
So I think it really helps to cover a beat over time. I'm 7 years into the climate beat, and in the beginning days, I was reporting on, oh my God, it's really bad. Like, wake up, wake up, wake up. But then I didn't have to do those kind of stories anymore because everybody knows, because it's happening to them now. And so the story, my focus has shifted towards people who are doing courageous things to either slow warming down or protect each other from the impacts. So I've been in this same conversation, asking those same questions for years with a group of people. And I find that I will hear people, I keep asking, who do you know? What are you seeing? And I first heard about the story I'm reporting 2 years ago. And it was just a side comment. Someone said, oh yeah, well, they're turning this factory into a climate shelter. And I was like, ding, ding, ding. I'm like, what kind of factory? Like, where's this factory? How do I get there? What are the directions? And I waited for the story to mature a little. Also, I was working on something else, but I slowly started, because I think it takes, once you found a story that might be interesting, you kind of have to vet it to see if it's real. To see if people are going to give you access or willing to talk to you. And that requires, of course, as you know, building trust over time. So I started to just have phone and Zoom conversations. And then there was always this sense of like, I started feeling like, oh no, this is an incredible example of this movement. And then I was finishing up another long form piece, and then this policy storm hit the US. This immense number of anti-LGBTQ plus bills happened. And I was like, oh, now's the time. Yeah, now's the time to go in. And so it was just at that point, like mobilization next level, But I guess for me, it just came from years of conversations and also reading a lot. There's new scholarly research that's based on what's called the Household Pulse Survey, which is a US Census tool that started identifying who was displaced after disasters, who was still displaced after disasters. And so, you're just a sponge. You're constantly taking in your beat and trying to, I had a professor once tell me, for every long form piece you do, you're reading like 7 or 8 books, even if you don't quote from them. This is Keith Gesson, by the way, I should give him credit. Even if you don't quote from them, they're in you, and so they're giving you a lot of perspective, and it's in every sentence. So that's how I'm doing it. And it's not always easy. Like, I've definitely had stories fall through, but you're always, I think, if you're a reporter, you're just naturally taking in stuff all the time. And, you probably have a list that if you just had funding, you'd want to get yourself to do these, in some way. So that's been my experience.
Yeah, I think I guess I've got a pretty similar thoughts on this to you. I think it's been hard during the last few years, obviously with COVID and everyone reporting from home, because obviously you want to be having that spontaneous drink at the pub, and then you have the weird conversation with the person down the bar who tells you the thing, and you find out this huge story that wasn't happening. But so I think there's being out there and being open and spontaneous to situations and conversations happening, which I think is something that like people have lost a little bit, maybe, just from the nature of being at home more. And then there's also, you know, reading academic journals or medical papers or all these things that are not necessarily direct journalism. But I think I found, started thinking about my piece a few years ago, so I can't quite remember exactly how it came about in my head, but I think it was actually something much more boring than having the pint and the spontaneous conversation, in that I read just a really generic, probably BBC article that was maybe a couple of paragraphs long, and it was just factual. And then I just started thinking, you know, what is the human story behind this? Who are the people being affected? What does this actually look like in real life, and how deep rooted is this issue? And I think that's how I probably come to quite a lot of my stories, which is just, you know, reading local news or just kind of factual daily news and trying to think about what the bigger picture is, if that makes sense.
I think Tom just asked a billion-dollar questions that all journalists want to crack. I agree with the two other grantees that reading local outlets and smaller outlets is important to identify a story in early stage, and just to talk with people with open mind and be a good listener, ask good questions, and having a lot of conversations, even though they may not become a story instantly. That's a part of the development and the learning process. And I always admire Kim of being ahead of the curve. Yeah, she always found stories before others were able to identify them. I think the key is really to be curious about everything and always ask questions, and to stay curious, to stay humble, to learn new skills. For example, data journalism or OSINT skills. These technical skills can enhance our storytelling as well. Yeah, so that's my 2 cents. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much. I think I can safely say that I speak for everyone when I say that we are very much looking forward to taking part of your journalism. Thank you so much.
I want to touch base with our team and see if there are any questions from anybody watching.
While our last call for questions to come in, we've got a couple on deck though. Give me 1 second.
I have a quick question while you're looking. You know, at the IWMF, we really focus on journalism safety, and it sounds like all of the stories that you all are dealing with have the potential for real danger and blowback to come your way. So I would love to hear what you are doing to mitigate that danger for yourselves. Any of you?
This is a story where I'm much more actually concerned about the danger to my sources. And so I have been thinking a lot about, which is some of the reason why I didn't give a whole bunch of details about who and where yet. There is, you know, when danger is real. And so you have to do a lot of steps, like make sure you're in a comfortable place when you're doing interviews. And one of the things, I was in grad school still when Kim disappeared, and we all waited and then heard the news. And I was walking through, you know, Pulitzer Hall where the vigils were, and it hit so deep and it changed my class so much. We started doing things like texting each other, like, okay, I'm going in to speak to the family now, I'll text you when I'm out. And they also, you know, immediately, and thanks to the IWMF too, we were in trainings about personal safety best practices. So yeah, it's top of mind. And female journalists, of course, deal with uncomfortable situations all the time, and you have to learn a lot of skills about how to mitigate them. And then also when you're writing about a topic like climate change or queer and trans rights, you're going to get blowback. I mean, you just have to be careful also with your online life. You know, locking down personal, being highly selective of what you're sharing publicly, and you know, maintaining privacy and just making sure that you know, none of us, I don't think, want to ever be a story. We're here to tell them. So that's sort of been my focus, but I really am on this one, especially concerned about the safety of my sources, and am talking to people about how to ensure that.
I think compared with Audrey and Isobel's project, mine seems to be of a safer nature. But as Audrey just mentioned, when we are on the ground, safety is always our priority. Like, it's the top thing on my mind. And even with such a story, I've drafted a security plan of how to address certain issues when they come up. And I can't emphasize more of the importance of HIFA training, the hostile environment and first aid trainings, which I fortunately got at the BBC, but I believe IWMF also has funding for female journalists to get this training, and that really helped me to get familiar with topics like emergency first aid, self-defense, and situational awareness, which I highly recommend other journalists to get as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd sort of like to sort of follow up on what the other two grantees said. Oh, sorry, it's a lag. Obviously, you know, I would work closely with an editor and with you guys to kind of clarify and define a kind of safety outline and protocol. But you know, I think that source safety is really of paramount importance. And I think when you're reporting on a topic of particular sensitivity, you can perhaps give sources more power and agency than you would in another scenario. Like, you know, to remain anonymous, walk through that, what it means to be, where the story, and I think that's like a big form of safety that you can offer them, and it is just super important to focus on when you're working on really sensitive stories. So obviously I'll be thinking about my safety. We'll be thinking about ways to really make sure that sources.
No, I think that there were some issues with the connection there. So I will just thank all of you for joining us. Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Kim Wall Memorial Fund grantees. We're so proud of you. So honored to be a part of your journalistic journey. And we're here for all of you for anything that you might need in the future. So just a pleasure to be with you, and thank you all as we remember Kim on this day, and we will certainly be thinking of her tomorrow. Thank you.